In this main topic that I was going to bring up, I want to talk about acoustic strings and kind of give a little bit of a guide of how we think about acoustic string materials and gauges.
Okay.
We're not going to get into specific brands, and we can get into like coded debates and stuff like that at another time. But I just kind of want to talk about gauges specifically, and I want to talk about materials. So the two most common materials is 80/20 bronze and phosphorbronze.
Right.
Um, and for me, the phosphorbronze is always much warmer, much fuller and fatter sounding. 80/20 is a lot brighter, a lot more poignant. Um,
You just say poignant?
yeah, that's not the right word I was looking for.
No, I was just proud of you for like using some vocabulary.
Yeah, it was not what I was searching for. It's what came out. But it kind of works for that, actually. So I think that certain guitars probably qualify for different strings, my opinion.
Sure.
So I kind of treat them all differently. But how do you treat these materials? Do you always go to one, phosphorbronze or 80/20? And do you always go to the same gauges, or do you change it up, or how do you pick those out? Because
So
it's honestly, acoustic strings are on top of the list for the biggest changer in acoustic sounds, I think.
yeah, strings and picks.
Strings and picks
I
and
mean,
setup.
well, yeah, but
Yeah.
that's without saying. Um, so I'm really basic when it comes to stuff like this,
Yeah.
and I don't. If
I,
it
I
works,
wish I wish I could be basic when it comes to this, but I just get in my head and get in the weeds. I can't do
yeah,
it.
if I find something that works, like I just try not to mess with it. So I've always used Elixir Phosphor Bronze. Now I will say I'll change the size, the gauge strings,
Mm-hmm.
depending on the guitar. So like for instance, I got a GS Mini. I'm gonna treat that a lot different than like a Martin full body dreadnought. I'm gonna change the size strings just to give it either a more dense sound to it, or if the guitar can handle a more dense sound. A GS Mini though, it's got some boom to it. So I really don't have to worry from that guitar so much to a dreadnought. But you get into things like Baby Taylors. You get into there's Martin's got some small body acoustics, Gibson L00s. I mean, you're gonna have to change up some of that string
Yeah.
mass. But I've always went with Elixir. I have no qualms with using Martin strings, Diodario, or anything like that. It's just what works. It's one of those things like I buy it and then I don't have to think about it for a while, and usually they stay in tune. So I don't have to stretch them all that much. So I've always went with that. So you're probably asking the wrong guy. And with all my acoustics, because they can handle the bass and because they have some highs to them and they're not all mahogany. I don't have any Gibson acoustics. Um, I've got Martin and I've got Taylor. But that being said, I really don't have to switch up my strings that much because they're all kind of the same ballpark.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think probably a lot of acoustic players kind of fall in that same type of realm, as a lot of their acoustic guitars are kind of in a little bit of a niche. If they're Martin guys, they're really hard into Martin guys, and they might not need to change their strings up a whole bunch because they're similar tonality.
Right.
If you've got drastically different guitars, it's really going to change things up quite a bit. So yeah, I changed my string gauge up according to kind of the size of the acoustic and what I'm using it for. I've got it's mahogany back and sides, spruce top with a cutaway and electronics. Its action's much lower. So for that reason, I use a lot lighter gauge string on that
Because you're going to be bending on it more.
because I'm going to be bending on it more. It's made mainly and set up mainly for plugging in and playing live acoustic electric stuff. So I use a little bit lighter gauge, but I still use phosphorbronze on that. Just gives it a nice full sound, especially if the string's lower. It helps if I do play it acoustically. It just sounds a little bit bigger to me and less thin. With my J45, I've got the actions quite a bit higher. I usually use light, sometimes medium gauge I've been playing with lately. And I've been a phosphorbronze guy on almost every guitar I've played for years and years. I've played with Monel strings from Martin, which everybody brags about and talks about so much. It's like, oh, this is great. And I think Tony Rice uses them and all these different things. And I tried them, and whenever they first came out of the package, they sounded awful. and everybody says they got to break in and you got to get them like sounding halfway decent after playing them for a little while. And then I played them for a little while and they sounded really good for like a week. And then they died out. And dead strings sometimes on acoustics are a really cool thing.
That's what I was going to go into when you were done here.
Yeah, and with the right guitar, that's perfect. But for my daily driver acoustic, I don't want like dead to the wall strings most of the time. And I just couldn't vibe with them. So I couldn't do that. I recently put a set of 80-20 bronze on my J45 and I thought, well, I need to play with this some more and play some different string gauges. So I tried a new string gauge and they were 80-20. And you actually heard it the other day and said you really like it and you thought it was your favorite strings you've ever heard on that J45. And I thought it was the worst strings I've ever heard on it.
Yeah.
So it just shows the difference in where we set with that.
Yeah.
And maybe what we're trying to get out of the guitar. Because you can get a lot of different sounds out of a guitar.
Oh, yeah, and where you're picking and using your fingers to pick, I mean.
Yeah. So I'm going to go back to the drawing board with this some more. And they were a light gauge of 80-20s. So maybe I'm going to try some medium 80-20s and it'll kind of balance that out. It won't be quite as thin as the 80-20s that were light because it'll be a little larger string.
Yeah.
But... yeah, at first I was like, oh, I got to get these things off here. And then you heard it and you were like, oh, no, that sounds great.
Yeah. You know who I bet, like, is the king of, all things with strings?
Who's that?
Billy Strings.
It was a joke. It was a bad joke.
Well, that's awful. Yeah. Well, the dad jokes are on point tonight.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I was going to say Brian Sudden, but I guess we're going Billy Strings. Brian Sudden is the acoustic master, and he loves just straight up D'Addario. I don't remember if he's using phosphorbronze or 80-20. I think he's using...
Sorry, I'm still laughing at my joke.
I know. We can't fix him, folks. We can't fix him.
Anyways.
But I think he's using phosphorbronze, if I remember right, and he kind of chooses gauge according to what string it is, or what guitar it is. So... yeah, I don't know. I've got some more playing to do with this, but if I'm choosing between 80-20 bronze and phosphorbronze, if I've got a guitar that's all rosewood with a spruce top, I'm probably looking more at phosphorbronze because it's a little warmer. Rosewood's a little brighter. If I'm looking at something like a D18 or even a J45, my first string I want to look at is probably an 80-20. Even though that's not been my go-to, I think that's probably what is going to match with it the best. And if I'm going with the small-bodied acoustics or something, I probably want a phosphorbronze because it's going to, make it sound that much bigger, that much warmer, unless you're going for an acoustic electric thing.
If you're in the weeds with us at this point and you're still listening, power to you.
Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, I'd be curious to see what you guys think of strings, what materials you're using, what sizes you use, and on what guitars. Because it's all within context.
For sure.
Because if you're just telling me what string you've got, well,
what music you're playing.
That's great. But yeah, what music? If you're playing bluegrass, you're going to want some big old heavy mediums. If you're playing some, wild other stuff, you might want something lighter.
Or maybe you play a nylon guitar string.
That's right.
So.
Yeah, there's tons of options out there. But yeah, let us know. Let us know the guitar, what type of stuff you're using, and we'll see you guys next week.
See you next week.